Begin Self-Publishing episode 146. Niklas Myhr joins the show.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
In this show, I'm introducing a new person who I'm taking through their book writing journey. Niklas Myhr, who is a professor of social media. In fact, he is the number one rated person on Google when you type in the social media professor. He teaches social media in a university in California, and I've been privileged to meet him quite a few times at conferences. And when he was over in a conference in London speaking, he looked me up and asked me for advice about writing a book. And I'm like, well, you might as well come on the show. So, with no further ado, let's go over to the interview. Hello, Niklas. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.
So, you have got yourself into a position where you have run a crowdfunding campaign for a book. That's my understanding. And you're going to be soon going into the process of actually trying to get that book created. Is that correct?
That's correct. I've been having a good experience with a platform called Publishizer that I know you're familiar with, and many of your listeners. And I raised $6,000 for my book on social media marketing, and I'm quite excited about that. And I have my book process is in motion, and I'm getting serious about getting this out 2019.
Okay. So I understand also, because we had a conversation in London about this, that this isn't actually going to be your first book, is it?
No, actually, it's going to be my second, unless you count my doctoral dissertation as a book, because it would actually make it my third. But most people don't read doctoral dissertations, and maybe I should sell it on Amazon. Who knows? But anyway, my first book was written 5 years ago in Swedish with a Swedish co-author, and was also about social media marketing. But this would be my first solo authored book in English.
So let's sort of take the very big picture and say, what are you trying to achieve with the book, and what is the book going to be about as far as you're aware?
For me, it's a way to package both the things I teach in my classrooms at Chapman University, where I'm a social media professor, and as an external speaker to audiences, to actually compartmentalize different ideas, examples, and theories to bring the best of what academia can offer, and combine that with case studies in the real world that I think illustrates what works and what doesn't work in social media today. And the specific focal point will be to build it around a customer journey from a social media standpoint. So I name it the social customer journey, because too much emphasis has been focused on automating things and making things happen with a magic button, etc. And sometimes social media is hard work, and I'm going to emphasize the human aspects of using social media to actually build real relationships, which is sometimes not scalable, sometimes not possible to automate. But still, I'm not negative towards using tools and automation or CRM or whatever, whenever it's appropriate, and finding the right mix at different stages is sort of the goal for me.
Okay. Is it going to be kind of more a practical book, or is it going to be like a theoretical one? As in, like, are you going to have like sort of exercises for people to do at the end of it, almost like an academic book, or are you just going to have it as kind of like, this is my theory about how social media marketing should work?
I would say it's going to be more of a big picture book in the sense that it's going to be inspirational with case studies and see what you can learn from a strategy standpoint, more so than having a detailed checklist for the settings of a specific platform's tool. But that being said, what I'm planning to do is have resources available on an accompanying website where people can actually check up resources and recommendations and tips and things that people share with me as well. So this becomes sort of a living organism.
Okay. And at the moment, what kind of state is the book in? I mean, have you got some sort of plan or sort of even like a rough idea of what the book content's going to be, or is this mainly in your head at the moment?
No, it's in terms of my process, it's not been as systematic as you probably with several books in the bag has been. But what I have been doing is sorting things into different buckets, and so the major categories would be basically dividing content into different pieces based on a customer journey, meaning from the discovery phase that you have a problem to the way that you screen and evaluate options and create a short list to the stage where you evaluate which one you're really going to go for, and perhaps even fall in love with a brand or experience that you go so far to share it with others and build a loyal relationship. So within that context, I have both writings, transcripts of my talks, and research articles that I've collected. And now the hard job is to basically compile that into legible chapters in a more structured way.
Okay, so just off the top of your head, I know this is a difficult question, how much of the book is going to be reprocessing basically existing material, and how much is going to be brand new stuff that you've got to write?
Much of it will stem from things that I already process, learn, read, and speak and teach about. So in that sense, I don't expect that I will make major new discoveries in my writing phase. That would take another year or two or a dissertation wide. But instead, I basically consider the life I'm living as sort of research in its own right. So my job is to package that to make it relevant for a reader of a book. And so the content will be new to the extent that I need to phrase things differently from a book audience as compared to a speaking audience, and perhaps summarize some of the inspiration sources I get, because a book, even though it's sort of a big task, it is still not indefinite in terms of size, and you basically have to package things and basically make it appetizing for a reader in order to not review a whole research stream, for example. What is relevant, and what can a practicing manager take from this? What are the takeaways, and still come across as credible in the sense of building upon some viable theories.
Okay, so we talked about this briefly in the pre-chat, but what would you say is the target market for the people you're writing this book for? Who would be the ideal person for you to be happy to buy your book?
This is a book that I would love for it to be read by management teams specifically focused on marketing communications. It would be CMOs and marketing managers, but also at the CEO level, where executives need to be familiar with how the digital world and social media in particular presents new challenges and opportunities for brands to actually make sure that they are relevant in today's marketplace. But beyond that, I think that the theories that I present will be relevant also for middle managers and people in agencies that want to get another fresh take on things that they sometimes have discussed before or even practiced, but maybe they can see examples from other businesses and industries that they haven't and have not encountered that can actually bring them ideas in order to be relevant in their business and daily life. When it comes to entrepreneurs and startups, I have a lot of students as well that come out of Chapman University. We have got an entrepreneurship center, and I stay connected with many students, and many of them come to me for advice in order to, what do you get started to build a presence from a brand new name of a company and a product that is the coolest things and sliced bread that they always have. And I'm always cautious to not dismiss the ideas, because I might have the next Mark Zuckerberg in my room, in my office, and I don't want to be like the guy who rejected the Beatles as a record label. So I try to keep an open mind and give them advice. And when it comes to social media for them, I think they have to go through a process as well in order to be ready to be engaging with an audience, the prospective audience, and build it up. I always try to emphasize to be a little bit patient, because these entrepreneurs are often extremely impatient. And that is perhaps one takeaway for that type of audience, that it's not going to happen overnight if you're going to build genuine customer relationships or relationships with people in general. which might benefit them not only for this startup that might fail, but also for the next one. If they build true relationships with people, that's going to carry over through the next venture as well, is my strong belief. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize. Finally, I've been invited to speak at public sector events, and many of the theories that I talk about for business are highly relevant also for a public sector organization, a city, government agency I've been speaking to in different countries, because even though they don't sell a product for profit, they still sell ideas and try to have people implement certain policies or follow regulations or take advantage of opportunities. And they also have to go through the same process in terms of building awareness and trust and having people become loyal and spread word of mouth.
Okay. So let's change the subject completely, because I like doing that. In terms of your work patterns at the moment, because I know that you have my tendency of never starting these things really. So have you got some bandwidth in terms of your time as to when you're going to get this book completed? I mean, I don't know, not being a professor, I don't know the the kind of like your timetable scale, but have you got like a few hours a week or maybe an hour a day or something like that where you could be doing this as a task, actually getting this book process kicked off and also finished?
No, it's an excellent question. And I believe that I'm very much in the batch processing mode. So the fortunate thing is, for example, I never teach on Thursdays and Fridays, and that is a prime opportunity that I'm trying to earmark dates where I'm actually going to disconnect and actually sit down and process things to get serious about the writing process in big chunks of time. But I'm also inspired by people like Chris Brogan. He basically shares his book writing process as being taken advantage of every 15-minute gap he's got in his calendar waiting for picking up a kid at a soccer game or whatever it is, that you actually have all these pockets if you have the right tools readily accessible. It might even be Google Docs on your phone that you actually, as long as you have specific writing goals in your outline, that you actually can take charge of. I'm also experimenting with various tools for transcribing audio and making sure that that sort of makes sense and is workable materials. So using all these gaps when I travel as a speaker as well, I often get a hotel night lonely in a room, and that is another opportunity to do things that are requiring you to disconnect from your daily disturbances. When it comes to longer sessions, I got really serious about finishing my doctoral dissertation by having my wife book a trip to an island outside Cancun in Mexico, and it was at a time when that island only had 14.4 kilobits per second connection on the internet cafe where she allowed me to go 10 minutes a day. So I think that I'm struggling like many others in terms of not always shutting off connectivity. I believe that I need to do that, maybe not full weeks, but at least in 4-hour blocks that I need to schedule in my calendar. I was inspired by a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. He is an academic who is going cold turkey on social media altogether. I'm not ready to go that far, but I believe that I want to use social media for what it's good at, staying connected with people such as yourself and spreading my message and following others, but not do it 24/7, but actually go more like a gearbox, on, off, on, off.
Yeah, I mean, I've started to do that recently where I've turned off actually all my social media notifications. I still look at my apps a lot. I'd taken it down to even where I had the little numbers on the apps. And even that was a temptation because I've always got notifications. I've always got like some. So I've taken them off and it has helped. And I've noticed on the screen time app on my iPhone, it says your time is like 70% down or whatever.
No, but I think it's true that you can get tactical or technical tools. Just the availability of them could be distracting. Just the fact that you have a phone near you, even upside down, and it presents a temptation to lift it up and check it, and that will sort of reduce your bandwidth on the task at hand. So I am aware of these tendencies, and I actually do manage some of this, and I teach my students some of this as well. The Pomodoro technique is one favorite. You have an egg timer as a tomato.
25 minutes, isn't it?
25 minutes, and then take 5-minute break, and then 25 minutes, and another 5-minute break, and then maybe take a longer break. But Sometimes I get more done in 3 Pomodoros than in a full workday if I truly focus on one task. I actually had a variation of that before I heard of the Pomodoro technique. When I did my doctoral dissertation, I bought a chess clock. And I don't know if you're familiar with chess, that you can actually have a button on each side. And when you have moved your piece, you press one button and the clock starts ticking on the opponent's side. And I usually set, when I worked on my dissertation, a chess game at 120 minutes a piece. And my goal then would be to press my side when I was working hard. And then when I was goofing off, I would press the other side. And when those 120 minutes had expired, I wanted to win the game. So I was more focused than goofing off. And that often meant that I became way more focused and beat that goofing off side.
Well, one thing I would say from my experience with book writing and just work in general is, when you're talking about these 15-minute period of time, I would use them for more of where you're going through something you've already written and you're kind of knocking it into the shape that you want. And I would use the longer periods of time, preferably together, for writing any of the new stuff. Simply because if you write your book in like 15-minute periods over sort of 6 months or something like that, it's going to be so much harder to edit it because you're likely to be repeating yourself, and like it might be like weeks between your quarter of an hour bits. And I think actually for book writing, for me, I mean, admittedly it could be different for other people, and I'm sure it works for Chris Brogan. But I think the more you can write in one go, and the more you can write in a shorter period of time, you just keep in your head more mentally everything that's going on in that section. And it makes the book better because in your mind, you're keeping all the points together. And also it makes it easier to edit it afterwards, both on your side and for whoever's editing it.
No, I think that's good advice based on experience. And I think you're right that you can do some of the housekeeping items in shorter spurts, and perhaps some of the corresponding administrative work and promotional work are things that don't necessarily require the same uninterrupted long blocks of time. But for coming up with new ideas, I think get comfortable with staring into a wall and waiting for the ideas to come. And I think it's an important lesson. And sometimes I get my best ideas in the shower, and I sort of wish I had a note board in the shower, but sort of sometimes I have to run out. But I think that I toyed with the idea of buying an old-fashioned typewriter and locking myself in a room with that, and actually just hearing the productive noise of clattering keys on it, and then basically pull out the piece of paper and scan it into optical character recognition and get it into Word after the fact. But there might be a process I haven't experimented with. Do you know anyone has tried that?
No. I mean, my opinion of that kind of process is like, don't do it. But it's like with Making Zhang, who's on a show. She was talking about handwriting the book, and I was like, well, if you really want to, but she gave up on that idea because you don't realize how much more productive new word processors and like computing technology is even than a typewriter. Because, and again, with writing first drafts, I say you want to be doing as little self-editing as possible. So just almost like stream of consciousness.
Thank you. I will not get an old-fashioned typewriter, but I am good at procrastinating by reading reviews of various book writing tools, and I have read a lot of them. But now I committed to using Scrivener.
Yeah, Scrivener is the one that I use. I mean, there are other free alternatives, but Scrivener's fairly cheap anyway. And I like the way that you can, like, it's got each section as a different, almost a blank page. Because one problem using something like Word is that if you're having to scroll up and down all the time, and you're kind of like, it's very easy to get distracted by what you've already written. Where something like Scrivener, where it's got each separate blocks, and you can drag them around, but you're only looking at that section. And also Scrivener's very good for word counts as well. So that's good if you're setting a target. When I've done NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing event, which I have in November, that's like 50,000 words, and that's where Scrivener comes in really useful.
Yeah, I like the tool. I haven't got 100% committed to it yet. One specific problem I have where you may have some advice is that I have loads of notes and research and background in Evernote, but in Scrivener you have sort of a research section other than the actual manuscript. And I haven't sort of committed to pull in all the things that I think might be relevant into the Scrivener interface, but I'm sort of working cross-platform on 2 different screens, which might be not ideal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use that functionality in Scrivener really. I'll say that I have used the non-writing sort of section for keeping like character and other, but this is more for fiction. But I mean, you can just cut and paste it once you get it right in Evernote into your document and then tidy it up there and forget about the research in Scrivener. I mean, there's lots of tools and things for that, but I mean, I'm not entirely convinced that's where it's best use really of Scrivener. But some people love that functionality.
No, I can see why it's useful if you commit to it, but if you do it half-heartedly, it may not be useful. So it's maybe use some key reminders or outline notes, but maybe not every article that I think might be relevant.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so it sounds like you've got a lot of idea about what you're doing. Now, I'm going to ask you a question now. When do you think that you might be in a position to get your first draft finished?
I actually think that if you push me on this in February 2019, I'm going to say that if you talk about a draft that is not yet in printable, sellable format, but a draft that can be shared as a working manuscript that is finished from a writing standpoint.
Yes.
That would be the goal, to have that done before this fall semester begins last Monday of August. So that would be, okay, so August 26 is when my fall semester begins. So I would certainly set that as a target to start working on the next phase, which is sort of the packaging and marketing, etc.
Well, yeah, and editing. And didn't you say to me that you already have a cover for the book or something along those lines?
Yes, I actually used 99 designs for that to put up on my crowdfunding campaign site, and it looks so good. So people actually, when they see that on my presentations as a slide, they actually think it is a book that exists. But I have to point out to them that, no, this is a pre-selling
You got the cover.
campaign.
Yeah.
It looks very legit, and I actually love the way it came out for just a few $100. It was like 100 something contributions from around the world, and I picked a winner from Indonesia. I had a good experience with that because it made me sort of package my thoughts in terms of how to position the book. And even though I still get some feedback on the subtitle, I may actually make some adjustments on the subtitle, but the main title, The Social Customer Journey, and makes a lot of sense with that cover. Just coming up with a full title and cover is sort of a stressful process in its own right, and I'm not saying that I couldn't make modifications to the cover. I got the sort of Adobe Photoshop files, and if I have a graphic designer that can help me perhaps figure out how to twist and tweak it, but at least I have a primary design that I'm like.
Okay. So I think we've got enough for this first episode, and I'll probably get back to you sometime in April, probably, because I've got a March full of international adventures in the US. So yes, I'll get back to you, and we'll talk again in April and discover how much or how little you've actually done in that time period.
What is the average outcome when you do follow-ups? Have they done more than they said or less than they committed to?
Almost universally less. But there is an element of guilt and accountability that comes into people when they go on the show. That means that they do something. And that's the main thing, I think, with anything with book writing. Some ways it doesn't matter if you're behind schedule. It's just the fact you're making progress, because books especially are something that people give up on a lot, and they really shouldn't. I mean, I tried writing books for years before I actually wrote my first book. And the thing that helped me was writing a plan and writing as fast as possible to get that first draft finished. Because once you've got a first draft for whatever reason, even though I find editing one of the most tedious processes ever known to mankind, you feel like, well, you've got it, so you've got to get the project finished. And you've kind of done that a bit with the publicizer campaign, but having some sort of deadline for each phase really helps, even if you miss it, because you might miss this August 26th deadline, but you might hit the end of September, for example. And even with that, that means you will still be able to get this book out in 2019. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you're not behind the next time we talk, but on the other hand, yeah, it's good to have kind of targets and things to work on anyway.
No, I appreciate your input and also the accountability partner aspect of your podcast. I'm sure it has served other people well, I hope it will serve me. And so I appreciate your interest.
Yeah. Well, it's great to talk to you today, Nicholas.
Well, thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. And say hi to London and hope to see you soon again.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.